The burning fragments of the Japanese Val dive bomber scattered across dark Pacific waters. Above, Lieutenant Russell "Red" Cochran released his grip on the firing controls. Mount 52 fell silent aboard USS Helena. The date was January 5, 1943. What Cochran had just witnessed defied everything he understood about naval gunnery. His shell had exploded nowhere near the aircraft, yet the bomber had disintegrated completely. No contact, no direct hit, just sudden, complete destruction at 2,100 yards distance. The young gun mount captain stared into the night. Scattered moonlight revealed only debris where moments before a Nakajima B-5N had been diving toward the American cruiser line. Something impossible had happened. A shell that never touched its target had somehow killed it. Cochran would learn later that he had fired the first proximity fuse in combat. The technology inside that 5-inch projectile would reshape the entire war. But on this January night, watching burning wreckage sink into black water, he knew only that warfare had suddenly changed in ways he couldn't comprehend. Inside that ordinary-looking shell, extraordinary technology had operated flawlessly. Radio waves had reached out from the projectile. They had found their target. Mathematical calculations had occurred in milliseconds. Death had been delivered with scientific precision. The bomber pilot never knew what killed him. One moment he was diving toward American ships. The next, his aircraft was exploding around him. No tracer rounds, no visible impact, just instantaneous destruction delivered by invisible forces. This was democracy's answer to fanaticism. Not matching courage with courage, not trading life for life, simply making enemy sacrifice irrelevant through superior technology. The proximity fuse had announced America's technological supremacy in the most direct way possible. By war's end, over 22 million of these devices would roll off American production lines. They would destroy thousands of aircraft. They would save tens of thousands of lives. They would transform Japanese kamikaze attacks from unstoppable weapons into predictable failures. But the story began much earlier. In London, during the Blitz, British gunners were firing 18,500 shells to destroy a single German bomber. The mathematics were unsustainable. Shells had to be preset for specific altitudes. Bombers constantly changed height. A shell exploding 100 feet away inflicted no damage whatsoever. September 1940 brought salvation in an unexpected form. Scientist Henry Tizard arrived in Washington. His black metal briefcase contained Britain's most precious military secrets, offered freely to America in exchange for production capacity. Among these treasures was a revolutionary concept: miniaturized radar, small enough to fit inside an artillery shell, smart enough to recognize aircraft, rugged enough to survive the massive forces of being fired from a gun. The idea seemed impossible. The execution would prove to be one of history's greatest engineering achievements. Section T of the National Defense Research Committee received the assignment. Dr. Merle Tuvey led the team at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. The challenges appeared insurmountable. Create a device smaller than a coffee cup. Make it survive 20,000 times the force of gravity. Ensure it could distinguish aircraft from ground clutter. Mass-produce it cheaply enough for widespread use. Every requirement pushed technology beyond existing limits. Vacuum tubes had to be miniaturized beyond anything previously attempted. Batteries had to activate under tremendous stress. Electronic circuits had to function while spinning at incredible speeds. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: hearing aid technology. Dr. James Van Allen, later discoverer of Earth's radiation belts, proposed using the smallest vacuum tubes available. Tubes designed for deaf patients' earpieces. These delicate devices would somehow have to survive the violent acceleration of naval gunfire. The forces involved were staggering. When a 5-inch gun fired, everything inside the shell experienced acceleration 20,000 times greater than gravity. Ordinary electronics would be crushed instantly. These miniaturized components had to not merely survive, but function perfectly afterward. Western Electric developed revolutionary manufacturing techniques. Workers used jeweler's loops to solder connections smaller than rice grains. Special springs supported vacuum tube elements, allowing flexing under acceleration without breaking. Quality control tested every 500th fuse by actually firing it. By December 1942, the first working prototype existed. The Mark 32 proximity fuse contained 5 vacuum tubes, a battery activated by firing forces, radio transmitting equipment, and sophisticated switching circuits. The entire device measured 3 inches long and weighed just over 11 ounces. Security surrounding the project rivaled the Manhattan Project itself. The fuses were designated VT for variable time to disguise their true nature. Workers at 87 firms across 110 facilities assembled components without knowing their purpose. Most believed they were manufacturing radio equipment for bombers. Production began slowly, then accelerated dramatically. By October 1944, American factories were producing 40,000 proximity fuses daily. The Crossley Corporation plant in Cincinnati became the largest single producer. Workers entered through guarded gates, surrendered all personal items, worked in windowless rooms, assembling parts identified only by code numbers. The program consumed strategic materials voraciously. Each fuse required small amounts of silver, gold, and platinum for electrical contacts. By 1945, proximity fuse manufacturing used more silver monthly than the entire pre-war American jewelry industry consumed annually. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Japanese military leaders faced mathematical reality. Conventional bombing achieved less than 10% hit rates against maneuvering American warships. After catastrophic losses in the Philippine Sea Battle, where 645 Japanese aircraft fell while destroying only 123 American planes, traditional tactics had become exercises in futility. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi commanded the First Air Fleet in the Philippines. He possessed fewer than 100 operational aircraft. American invasion fleets numbered over 700 ships. The arithmetic of defeat was undeniable. Conventional attacks would accomplish nothing except the meaningless death of pilots. At Mabalacat Airfield on October 19, 1944, Onishi presented his solution to assembled staff officers. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi recorded his exact words. "The salvation of our country demands spirited young men willing to sacrifice their lives by crashing into enemy carriers." The logic appeared irrefutable. One pilot, one aircraft, potentially one ship destroyed. In Japan's desperate situation, this equation offered hope where none had existed. The first organized kamikaze attack launched October 25, 1944. Lieutenant Yukio Seki led 5 Zero fighters of the Shimpu Special Attack Unit. Each aircraft carried a 250-kilogram bomb. Each pilot carried photographs of Emperor Hirohito and farewell poems for their families. Their target was American escort carriers off Samar. They achieved what months of conventional bombing had failed to accomplish. Direct hits on American warships. USS St. Lo suffered a kamikaze strike that killed 16 sailors and wounded dozens more. USS Suwannee was struck minutes later, flames spreading across her flight deck. Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's leading ace with 34 victories, filed his action report with growing concern. This form of attack is impossible to stop completely. No amount of pilot skill guarantees interception of every attacker. We face an enemy who has weaponized death itself. Before proximity fuses became widespread, American naval air defense relied on 3 weapon systems. Each possessed critical limitations that kamikaze tactics ruthlessly exploited. The outer ring consisted of 5-inch guns, engaging targets between 10,000 and 18,000 yards. These weapons fired shells with mechanical time fuses requiring manual setting before loading. Fire control officers used Mark 37 directors, analog computers calculating where aircraft would be when shells arrived. Against predictable bombers maintaining steady courses, the system functioned adequately. Against kamikazes diving at 400 miles per hour while constantly maneuvering, it became nearly useless. Gunner's Mate First Class James Morrison aboard USS Enterprise described the frustration perfectly. We calculated for 4.5 seconds, expecting the plane at 8,000 feet. But kamikazes would dive, climb, slip sideways, anything to disrupt our solution. By the time our shells exploded, aircraft were hundreds of feet away. We were attempting to solve geometry problems with arithmetic, while the enemy rewrote the equations continuously. The intermediate defense consisted of 40mm Bofors guns, providing coverage between 4,000 and 6,000 yards. These weapons fired contact-fused shells requiring direct hits. Against diving kamikazes presenting frontal targets smaller than 80 square feet, gunners had to achieve precision strikes on objects moving at 400 to 500 miles per hour. Statistical analysis revealed single-round hit probability below 0.3%. Chief Petty Officer Harold Stassen commanded a quad 40mm mount aboard USS Hornet. His testimony captured the weapon's limitations perfectly. We fired 480 rounds per minute, tracers everywhere, watching kamikazes fly straight through our fire. Even when we achieved hits, unless we destroyed the engine or killed the pilot instantly, momentum carried them into the ship. The final defensive line consisted of 20mm Oerlikon cannons engaging targets at 2,000 yards or less. By the time kamikazes entered this range, impact was typically 5 seconds away. These weapons fired shells so small that multiple hits were required for structural destruction. Seaman First Class Robert Baker, an Oerlikon gunner aboard USS Missouri, recalled the terrifying reality. At 2,000 yards, you had maybe 4 seconds. Your mind went blank. You held the trigger and prayed. Even if you shredded the wings, the fuselage kept coming like a guided missile. British experience during the London Blitz had demonstrated these limitations dramatically. During 1940, anti-aircraft batteries required an average of 18,500 shells to destroy one German bomber. Conventional fuses detonated at predetermined times regardless of target proximity. A shell exploding 100 feet from an aircraft inflicted no damage. One exploding within 30 feet proved lethal. The difference between effectiveness and waste came down to precise timing impossible to achieve with mechanical fuses against maneuvering targets. Henry Tizard's September 1940 mission to Washington carried the solution. The assignment went to what would become Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. Dr. Merle Tuvey assembled a team of physicists, engineers, and electronics specialists. Their mission appeared impossible: create miniaturized radar sophisticated enough for combat use. James Van Allen provided the crucial insight. Hearing aid vacuum tubes represented the smallest electronic components available. These devices, designed for deaf patients, would somehow have to function after experiencing forces that would crush ordinary equipment. The Mark 32 prototype contained revolutionary engineering solutions. 5 vacuum tubes provided oscillation, amplification, and switching functions. A glass electrolyte capsule shattered during firing, activating a wet cell battery. Radio frequency circuits operated at 180 MHz, transmitting signals and analyzing returns. The complete device had to function after experiencing 20,000 times normal gravity, spin at 30,000 revolutions per minute, and operate in temperatures from -40 to +140 degrees Fahrenheit. Manufacturing required techniques never before attempted in mass production. Western Electric developed microscopic springs supporting vacuum tube elements. These allowed flexing under extreme acceleration without breaking connections. Quality control exceeded anything previously attempted in American industry. Every 1,000th fuse was test-fired at Aberdeen Proving Ground. USS Helena's January 5, 1943, success proved the concept in combat. But widespread Pacific deployment awaited resolution of security concerns. The Navy feared captured fuses might reveal the technology to enemies. For months, proximity fuses could only be used over water where recovery was impossible. By October 1944, as kamikaze attacks intensified, security concerns yielded to operational necessity. American ships began receiving proximity-fused ammunition in crates marked "Special Ammunition, Handle with Care." Most gunnery officers received only basic operating instructions without understanding the underlying technology. The shells appeared identical to conventional rounds, except for small plastic nose cones protecting radio antennas. Captain Willis Lee, commanding Battleship Division 7, received the first major shipment in November 1944. His gunnery officer, Commander Edwin Hooper, recalled the transformation. "They told us these shells would triple our effectiveness against aircraft. We thought it was propaganda until we saw them work." The proximity fuse operated on elegant physics principles despite its internal complexity. As shells approached aircraft, transmitted radio waves reflected back with increasing strength. When return signal amplitude indicated targets within lethal radius, typically 70 feet for 5-inch shells, fuses triggered detonation. Explosions created spheres of steel fragments expanding at supersonic speed. Each fragment could penetrate aircraft aluminum at 200 yards distance. The truly revolutionary aspect was discrimination capability. Rain, clouds, and chaff provided insufficient radar return for triggering. Ground return was filtered out by Doppler shift, the same phenomenon changing train whistle pitch as trains pass. Only rapid closure rates with aircraft created precise conditions for detonation. The invasion of Okinawa beginning April 1, 1945, became the proximity fuse's supreme combat test. Japanese launched 10 massive Kikusui operations totaling approximately 1,900 kamikaze sorties over 3 months. For the first time, most American ships carried proximity-fused ammunition for all calibers from 5-inch down to 40 mm. The first Kikusui attack on April 6, 1945, coincided with Operation Tengo, battleship Yamato's suicide sortie. Kikusui I involved 355 kamikaze aircraft and 344 conventional fighters. At 1500 hours, radar screens aboard USS El Dorado displayed what operators called a snowstorm. So many aircraft appeared that individual returns merged into solid masses. Fire Controlman Second Class Eugene Hardy, aboard destroyer USS Newcomb, described the action. They approached in waves, one after another. Our 5-inch guns opened fire at 12,000 yards. We could see black puffs way out there, and planes falling. Not diving, but falling broken. The proximity fuses were converting near misses into kills. USS Laffey's April 16th ordeal provided the most dramatic demonstration. At Radar Picket Station No. 1, the destroyer faced 22 kamikaze aircraft in 80 minutes. Her crew fired 637 rounds of proximity-fused 5-inch ammunition. Despite being struck by 6 kamikazes and 4 bombs, La Fay survived. Her guns destroyed at least 9 attackers. Proximity fuses created what survivors described as a wall of steel around the ship. Commander Frederick Beckton, Laffey's captain, reported the transformation in his action report. The proximity fuses saved us. We'd see kamikazes boring in at impossible angles. Our guns would fire, and planes would simply disappear. Not shot down, but disintegrated in mid-air. The fuses converted our defensive fire from probability into certainty. Statistics from Okinawa revealed the complete transformation proximity fuses had achieved. Ships equipped with these weapons destroyed kamikaze aircraft at rates 7 times higher than those using conventional ammunition. The difference translated directly into lives and ships saved. Japanese pilots quickly recognized fundamental changes in American anti-aircraft capabilities, though they never understood the cause. Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Minobe, who flew escort for kamikaze missions, testified after the war about the mysterious improvement. Beginning in late 1944, American anti-aircraft fire became supernatural. Planes would explode without being hit directly. Our pilots reported Americans had deployed invisible wires or aerial mines. We developed various theories, but never discovered the truth. Captured Japanese documents revealed growing confusion among their forces. A tactical bulletin from the 201st Air Group dated December 1944 stated recommendations for dealing with the inexplicable phenomenon. Enemy anti-aircraft effectiveness has increased dramatically. Shells appear to detonate by proximity rather than contact. Recommend irregular flight paths and extreme diving angles to minimize exposure time. Japanese developed numerous theories attempting to explain American improvements. Magnetic fuses attracted to aircraft engines. Infrared sensors detecting heat signatures. Even speculation about psychics who could detonate shells mentally. They wrapped engines in asbestos, installed degaussing coils, experimented with wooden aircraft construction. All measures proved futile against radar-based fuses. Ensign Toshio Yoshitake, captured after his aircraft was damaged by proximity fuse fragments, told American interrogators about the psychological impact. We were informed American gunners were poorly trained and relied on volume fire, but their shells seemed to know where we were located. They would explode all around us, creating walls of metal fragments. Flying through American defensive fire became like penetrating a steel storm. The Mark 53 proximity fuse, most common by 1945, represented remarkable miniaturization achievement. Each unit contained 134 electronic components, assembled with microscopic precision. Complete devices had to function after experiencing 20,000 times gravity during firing. They spun at 30,000 revolutions per minute in flight, while operating in temperatures from -40 to +140 degrees Fahrenheit. Manufacturing required revolutionary techniques never before attempted. Workers used jeweler's loopies to solder connections smaller than rice grains. Quality control tested every 500th fuse by actually firing it from guns. Rejection rates initially exceeded 60%, but improved to under 8% by 1945 through continuous refinement of production techniques. The battery alone represented breakthrough engineering. A glass ampule containing electrolyte shattered upon firing, activating a wet cell providing power for 20-second flight times. This design meant fuses could be stored indefinitely without battery degradation concerns. Western Electric developed special vacuum tube construction techniques. Supporting elements incorporated microscopic springs allowing flexing under extreme acceleration without breaking internal connections. These modifications enabled hearing aid tubes to survive forces that would crush standard electronics. Proximity fuses revolutionized naval anti-aircraft doctrine beyond simply improving existing tactics. Before their introduction, ships relied on barrage fire, creating walls of shells, hoping aircraft would fly through them. This required enormous ammunition expenditure with poor success probability. Commander Joseph Callahan, tactical officer for Task Force 58, explained the doctrinal transformation. With time-fused shells, we attempted hitting specific points in space at specific moments, nearly impossible against maneuvering targets. With proximity fuses, we only needed reasonably close approaches. The fuse handled precision. Ships developed new firing patterns optimized for proximity fuse capabilities. Instead of concentrated barrages, they could engage multiple targets simultaneously with smaller salvos. A destroyer previously needing 50 rounds for reasonable hit probability could now engage 3 aircraft with identical ammunition expenditure. The fuses enabled effective night defense for the first time in naval history. Previously, darkness made range estimation nearly impossible for setting time fuses. Proximity fuses eliminated this limitation entirely. Shells determined their own detonation points regardless of visibility conditions. Lieutenant Commander Roger Bond, gunnery officer aboard USS Enterprise, reported the dramatic improvement. Night kamikaze attacks had been our nightmare scenario. We'd fire thousands of rounds blindly into darkness. With proximity fuses, our night effectiveness jumped from maybe 10% to over 70%. The Japanese virtually abandoned night attacks by mid-1945. By war's end, American factories had produced 22,734,481 proximity fuses, one for every 6 people living in Japan. The program employed workers at 87 firms, operating 110 facilities with security rivaling the Manhattan Project. The Crossley Corporation plant in Cincinnati became the largest single producer, manufacturing 16,500 units daily at peak production. The factory operated under extraordinary security measures. Workers entered through guarded gates, surrendered all personal items, and labored in windowless rooms. They assembled components identified only by code numbers. Quality control exceeded anything previously attempted in mass production history. Every 1,000th fuse underwent test firing at Aberdeen Proving Ground. If any failed to detonate within specified parameters, entire batches were rejected. This stringent testing achieved combat reliability exceeding 95%. The program consumed strategic materials voraciously. Each fuse required small quantities of silver, gold, and platinum for electrical contacts. By 1945, proximity fuse production used more silver monthly than the entire pre-war American jewelry industry consumed annually. Intelligence battles surrounded the technology intensely. Both Germany and Japan desperately attempted discovering American improvements. The Germans captured examples used against V-1 flying bombs over England and tried developing countermeasures. The Japanese, lacking captured specimens, attempted piecing together the technology from combat observations and recovered shell fragments. American intelligence implemented extraordinary protection measures. Proximity fuses could only be used over water until late 1944. When USS Drexler sank at Okinawa with magazines full of proximity-fused ammunition, the Navy considered demolishing the wreck to prevent enemy recovery of intact examples. Commander Joseph Rush IV, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Chief, coordinated elaborate deception campaigns. False intelligence was deliberately leaked, suggesting improved effectiveness came from better training and optical sights. Captured German agents were fed disinformation about magnetic anomaly fuses supposedly detecting Earth's magnetic field distortions. The Japanese never acquired intact proximity fuses during the entire war. Their best intelligence came from interrogating captured B-29 crew members who possessed limited knowledge. This led Japanese scientists on futile pursuits, developing radio-guided shells and other irrelevant technologies. The U.S. Navy's Operational Research Group conducted detailed effectiveness analysis throughout 1945. Their findings, classified until 1958, revealed proximity fuses' true strategic impact on Pacific combat operations. During pre-proximity fuse operations from October 1944 to January 1945, kamikaze aircraft achieved 28.7% hit rates, counting both direct strikes and damaging near misses. Ships averaged 312 rounds fired per aircraft destroyed. Destroyer picket vessels suffered 1 sunk or severely damaged per 15 kamikaze sorties. After widespread proximity fuse deployment from February to August 1945, kamikaze hit rates dropped to below 10%. Ships averaged 89 rounds per aircraft destroyed, a 71% ammunition efficiency improvement. Destroyer losses dropped to 1 per 47 kamikaze sorties, despite Japanese adoption of more aggressive tactics. Analysis revealed important tactical nuances. Proximity fuses proved most effective against high-angle diving attacks, the kamikaze's preferred approach, with success rates exceeding 85% against aircraft diving steeper than 45 degrees. Against low-level approaches, effectiveness dropped but remained superior to conventional ammunition. Captain Willis Lee's April 1945 action report provided specific combat examples. During the 16th April engagement, this force engaged 43 attacking aircraft. Proximity-fused 5-inch ammunition accounted for 31 confirmed kills at ranges between 4,000 and 9,000 yards. Conventional ammunition fired simultaneously achieved 3 kills despite expending 40% more shells. The comparison demonstrated proximity fuses' overwhelming superiority in actual combat conditions. Not every ship immediately mastered proximity fuse employment effectively. The technology required new training programs, revised tactics, and modified maintenance procedures. USS Newcomb's experience illustrated the learning curve involved. Initially, the destroyer's crew set radar-controlled guns for maximum rate continuous fire. This created electromagnetic interference between multiple proximity fuses, actually reducing overall effectiveness. 5 kamikazes penetrated their defenses on April 6, 1945, causing severe structural damage. Lieutenant Commander Irving McPherson, Newcomb's gunnery officer, reported lessons learned from the engagement. "We were firing so many proximity fuses simultaneously, they interfered with each other. Radio waves from multiple shells created false returns. We learned to coordinate fire carefully, using controlled bursts rather than continuous streams." The Navy rapidly developed new doctrines addressing these issues. Ships designated specific mounts for proximity-fused firing, while others used conventional ammunition. Fire control teams developed pulse patterns, rhythmic firing sequences minimizing interference while maximizing defensive coverage. Maintenance proved equally crucial for sustained effectiveness. The delicate electronics required protection from humidity, salt spray, and temperature extremes common in Pacific operations. Ships in tropical waters discovered fuses stored in uncooled magazines often failed during combat. Solutions included installing dehumidifiers and temperature controls in ammunition storage spaces. These modifications became standard throughout the Pacific Fleet by spring 1945. The proximity fuse program's scale defied easy comprehension. Manufacturing statistics told only part of the story. Production output totaled 22,734,481 fuses from January 1943 to August 1945. 110 facilities across 26 states participated in manufacturing. Peak daily production reached 75,000 fuses of all types, with 40,000 anti-aircraft fuses produced daily. The program cost $1.2 billion in 1940s dollars. Material consumption included 12 tons of silver monthly, 800 pounds of gold monthly, and 15,000 miles of wire daily. 140 million vacuum tubes were manufactured specifically for proximity fuses. Quality metrics achieved remarkable standards: 95.3% combat reliability, 0.3% premature detonation rate, 4.4% DUD rate, and 99.7% storage stability after 1 year. Japanese records captured after surrender revealed proximity fuses' psychological impact on kamikaze units. The 721st Naval Air Group's war diary, recovered from Kanoya Air Base, contained increasingly desperate entries throughout 1945. January 1945 entry noted enemy anti-aircraft fire, showing marked improvement, with shells detonating by proximity rather than timer. March 1945 reported losses before reaching attack positions exceeding 60%. Enemy shells create impenetrable barriers around high-value targets. Morale declining as pilots realize death may come without achieving impact. May 1945 described pilots reporting flying into solid walls of steel fragments. Conventional evasive maneuvers proved ineffective. July 1945 noted daily sake rations being increased. Many volunteers expressed preferences for conventional missions despite lower honor. Enemy fire appears guided by supernatural forces, the diary recorded. Lieutenant Kiyoshi Ogawa, one of few kamikaze pilots surviving multiple missions due to mechanical failures, testified after the war about the psychological devastation. "We expected to die gloriously for the Emperor. Instead, we watched comrades explode far from targets. Their sacrifices became meaningless. It was not honorable battle, but systematic execution." The Mark 53 proximity fuse standard by 1945 represented extraordinary engineering achievement within severe physical constraints. Physical specifications included length of 3.2 inches, diameter of 2.1 inches, and weight of 11.3 ounces. The device contained 134 individual component parts, forming complex electronic systems. The oscillator operated at frequencies between 180 to 220 MHz with power output of 0.4 watts. Detection range was adjustable between 15 to 70 feet. Battery life lasted 20 to 30 seconds post-activation. Signal processing involved 4-stage amplification. Performance parameters included activation setback of 20,000 G, spin tolerance of 30,000 RPM, and temperature range from -65 to +165 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity resistance reached 98% at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Shock survival rated 500 G lateral forces. The fuse's operation remained elegantly simple despite internal complexity. Firing setback shattered the electrolyte ampule, activating the battery system. Centrifugal force from shell spin armed the detonator after 0.8 seconds. The oscillator transmitted radio waves while the receiver monitored for returns. When reflected signal amplitude indicated targets within lethal radius, the thyrotron switch discharged the firing capacitor. The entire sequence from detection to detonation required only 0.0003 seconds, faster than human reflexes could register. Admiral Richmond Turner, commanding amphibious forces at Okinawa, credited proximity fuses with making the invasion strategically feasible. Without proximity fuses, I estimate our losses would have exceeded 150 ships sunk or severely damaged. The invasion might have failed entirely. This technology saved tens of thousands of American lives and made victory possible against fanatical opposition. Proximity fuse effectiveness influenced Japanese strategic decision-making at the highest levels. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement mentioned a new and most cruel bomb, referring to atomic weapons, but Japanese military records showed equal concern about conventional defense improvements. An Imperial Navy staff study from July 1945 reached sobering conclusions. Enemy anti-aircraft capabilities have progressed to where special attack operations no longer achieve favorable exchange ratios. Continuation of current tactics appears mathematically impossible. Post-war strategic bombing survey interviews revealed proximity fuses' strategic impact on Japanese planning. Admiral Soemu Toyota, Chief of Naval General Staff, stated the harsh mathematical reality. We calculated 500 special attack aircraft could destroy 100 American ships at Okinawa. Due to their new anti-aircraft weapons, 500 aircraft achieved fewer than 30 ships seriously damaged. This failure made continuation impossible. The proximity fuse program's economics proved remarkably favorable when analyzed post-war. The investment return calculation showed program costs of $1.2 billion against estimated savings of ships worth $8 billion replacement cost. Lives saved numbered 40,000 to 60,000, estimated with medical and disability costs, avoided totaling $2 billion. Operational efficiency improvements included 70% reduction in ammunition expenditure and 60% decrease in magazine space requirements. Gun crew fatigue was reduced 50%, while engagement time per target decreased 65%. Exchange ratios favored America dramatically. One proximity fuse cost $18. One 5-inch shell cost $12. Combined expense totaled $30. Average kamikaze aircraft cost $15,000. The exchange ratio of $500 to 1 proved overwhelmingly favorable. By July 1945, proximity fuses had become so effective that Japanese tactics underwent radical revision. Operation Ketsugo, the plan for defending the home islands, abandoned mass daylight kamikaze attacks entirely. New emphasis focused on night attacks, ultra-low approaches, and poor weather exploitation. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, commanding Special Attack Forces, wrote in his diary, July 24, 1945, "The Americans have developed defenses we cannot penetrate. Young men die uselessly, exploding in empty sky far from targets. We must discover new methods or abandon special attacks entirely." The Japanese developed Operation Tsurugi, suicide attacks using stripped fighters flying at wave-top height, avoiding radar detection. Aircraft would approach below 50 feet altitude, climbing only seconds before impact. Limited trials showed promise, but Japan surrendered before implementation. Japanese scientists worked frantically on electronic countermeasures throughout 1945. Project Yashima attempted developing jamming transmitters for proximity fuse frequencies. Laboratory tests demonstrated promise, but Japan lacked industrial capacity for meaningful production. Their best prototype weighed 200 pounds and required its own aircraft, defeating the tactical purpose entirely. Proximity fuse success triggered rapid technology transfer across Allied forces. British forces used ground-based anti-aircraft guns with proximity fuses to destroy 79% of V-1 flying bombs targeting London after December 1944. Soviet forces received 25,000 proximity fuses under Lend-Lease and reported similar success defending Eastern Front cities. The technology spawned immediate innovations across multiple weapon systems. By war's end, American scientists had developed proximity fuses for aerial rockets, naval rockets, artillery shells, mortar rounds, and aerial bombs. Each application required unique modifications addressing specific technical challenges. Rocket fuses accommodated higher velocities. Artillery fuses incorporated ground return filters. Bomb fuses included barometric switches, preventing high-altitude detonation. Each variant pushed miniaturization technology further. Unknown to Americans, Germany had independently developed proximity fuses, illustrating the difference between invention and production capability. German Kranich fuses used capacitive sensing, detecting electrical field disturbances caused by aircraft proximity. The German design was arguably more elegant, requiring only 23 components versus the American fuse's 134 parts. But it proved impossible to mass-produce using German manufacturing methods and materials. Total German production reached only 8,000 units before war's end, compared to America's 22 million. Dr. Hubert Schardin, lead German proximity fuse scientist, wrote post-war about the disparity. We solved the theoretical problem in 1940, before the Americans began serious development. But theory without production capacity remains merely interesting. The Americans manufactured in one day what required us 1 month. Statistical analysis reveals proximity fuse's role in preventing catastrophic casualties during the planned invasion of Japan. Operation Downfall, scheduled for November 1945, anticipated 5,000 to 10,000 kamikaze aircraft attacking invasion fleets. Pre-proximity fuse loss rates suggested 400 to 500 ships sunk or severely damaged, with 100,000 naval casualties. With proximity fuses, planners reduced estimates to 150 ships lost and 25,000 casualties. Still horrific numbers, but manageable compared to alternatives. Atomic weapons use eliminated the need to test these projections. But Okinawa experience suggested even reduced estimates were pessimistic. Individual ship experiences illustrated lives saved through technology. USS Aaron Ward, attacked by multiple kamikazes on May 3, 1945, shot down 6 aircraft with proximity-fused ammunition despite suffering damage from 3 hits. Statistical analysis suggested that without proximity fuses, most attacking aircraft would have struck home, likely sinking the ship with heavy casualties. Gunner's mate Artilleryman Flores, commanding Mount 52 during USS Laffey's ordeal, later calculated using computer analysis. Studies in the 1970s showed that with conventional ammunition, we would have been hit by 14 kamikazes instead of 6. No destroyer survives 14 kamikaze impacts. Every man aboard owed his life to proximity fuses. Fire controlman Lawrence Delowski added personal perspective. The proximity fuse gave us hope during impossible situations. Before, when radar showed 50 bogies incoming, we knew most would penetrate our defenses. After VT fuses, we had confidence. The technology was finally on our side instead of working against us. The proximity fuse program advanced multiple technological fields by decades. Miniaturization requirements pioneered techniques later used in transistor development. Mass production methods presaged modern electronics manufacturing. Quality control standards established benchmarks still used in aerospace applications. Dr. James Van Allen reflected in 1980 on the program's broader significance. The proximity fuse program was the Manhattan Project of electronics. We compressed 20 years of development into 24 months under wartime pressure. Every cell phone, every computer, every piece of modern electronics owes something to manufacturing techniques we pioneered. The program produced 87 patents and established 12 new manufacturing processes. Thousands of workers trained in precision electronics assembly formed America's post-war electronics industry core. Companies like Texas Instruments, Fairchild Semiconductor, and Intel traced origins to proximity fuse manufacturers. Japan's post-war evaluation appeared in the 1952 War History series published by the Japanese Defense Agency. The analysis concluded proximity fuses had fundamentally altered special attack operations mathematics, rendering them strategically ineffective by March 1945. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi, senior kamikaze operations staff officer, wrote in 1958 about the technology's impact. The proximity fuse was not merely technical improvement, but paradigm shift. It transformed anti-aircraft fire from probability-based to deterministic. Our pilots faced not random death, but systematic destruction with mathematical certainty. Admiral Takejiro Onishi, the kamikaze program's creator, committed suicide August 16, 1945. His note read partially, "I apologize to the souls of brave subordinates and their bereaved families for sending them to deaths that achieved nothing." Historians believe proximity fuse effectiveness contributed significantly to his despair. Throughout 1945, proximity fuses underwent continuous improvement based on combat experience and technical advances. The Mark 58, introduced May 1945, incorporated Okinawa lessons learned, improved discrimination circuits, reduced cloud triggering by 90%. Variable sensitivity settings accommodated different target sizes. Enhanced countermeasures defeated Japanese jamming attempts. Extended battery life reached 35 seconds operational duration. Miniaturized components reduced weight to 9.8 ounces per unit. The Mark 59, ready when Japan surrendered, would have incorporated micro-alloy vacuum tubes, increasing reliability to 99.2% while reducing manufacturing cost to $11 per unit. The proximity fuse program demonstrated American industrial adaptability under extreme pressure. Factories that had never produced electronics transformed overnight into precision manufacturers. Zenith Radio Corporation's Chicago plant converted from home radios to proximity fuses in 6 weeks. The program required unprecedented cooperation between traditional competitors. RCA, Westinghouse, General Electric, and Sylvania shared patents and manufacturing techniques freely. Trade secrets closely guarded in peacetime were published in weekly bulletins distributed to all manufacturers. The proximity fuse's Pacific War impact in definitive numbers revealed its decisive nature. Combat performance statistics showed 22,734,481 fuses produced with 5.3 million fired in actual combat. 7 times effectiveness increase over conventional fuses was achieved. 70% reduction in ammunition expenditure resulted. Lives and ships saved included an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 American lives. 200-plus major warships were preserved. 500-plus smaller vessels avoided destruction. Japanese losses attributed to proximity fuses included 2,800-plus aircraft destroyed and 4,200-plus pilots killed. Kamikaze effectiveness was reduced from 28.7% to below 10%. Economic impact showed $1.2 billion investment, preventing $10 billion in losses for an 8.3 to 1 return on investment. Admiral Mark Mitcher, Task Force 58 commander, submitted his final action report August 20, 1945. The proximity fuse was the decisive technology in defeating Japanese special attack tactics. Without it, our losses would have been unsustainable. With it, kamikaze attacks became exercises in enemy attrition rather than mutual destruction. In the war's final month, Japanese kamikaze units achieved only 2.8% success rates. 97 of every 100 pilots died without reaching their targets. The proximity fuse had transformed kamikazes from unstoppable force into predictably defeated tactic. Captain Joseph N. Wright, commanding USS Archerfish, provided eloquent summary of the transformation. The proximity fuse didn't just shoot down airplanes, it shot down an entire military philosophy. The Japanese believed spiritual superiority could overcome material disadvantage. The proximity fuse proved that technology properly applied defeats fanaticism regardless of enemy dedication. The proximity fuse established principles still governing military technology development. Miniaturization multiplies power by fitting advanced capabilities into smaller packages. Fitting radar into artillery shells proved size reduction multiplies military effectiveness exponentially. Every modern smart weapon traces lineage directly to proximity fuses. Production capacity wins wars more than individual innovation. Germany's superior design meant nothing without production capability. America's ability to manufacture millions of complex devices proved decisive. Modern doctrine emphasizes system integration over breakthrough innovation alone. The proximity fuse contained no revolutionary components individually, just existing technologies brilliantly integrated. Today's automated defense systems follow proximity fuse principles established 80 years ago. Automation saves lives by removing human decision-making from split-second combat situations. This dramatically improves effectiveness while reducing casualties among defenders. The radar proximity fuse stands as World War II's most decisive yet underappreciated technology. While atomic bombs ended the war dramatically, proximity fuses had already made invasion of Japan feasible by neutralizing the kamikaze threat. Without them, American casualties might have reached levels making continued war politically impossible in a democracy. The numbers tell only part of this remarkable story. Behind every statistic were young Americans who lived because shells exploded at precisely the right moments. Behind every successful interception were young Japanese who died without achieving their sacrifices' intended purpose. The proximity fuse transformed the Pacific War's final act from mutual slaughter into technological dominance so complete that further resistance became meaningless. It was more than a weapon system. It represented American industrial and scientific supremacy made manifest in 22 million miniaturized radars. It declared that no amount of individual courage, no willingness to die, no spiritual devotion could overcome the material advantages of a fully mobilized democracy. Kamikaze pilots offered their lives willingly for emperor and nation. The proximity fuse made that ultimate offer strategically irrelevant through superior technology and mass production. Sailors who watched kamikazes disintegrate in mid-air without understanding how. Workers who assembled components without knowing their deadly purpose. Scientists who solved impossible problems under impossible deadlines. All participated in democracy's answer to totalitarian fanaticism. That answer, delivered through 22 million proximity fuses, was elegantly simple yet devastatingly effective. American technology would protect American lives regardless of the price enemies were willing to pay. Superior science and engineering would defeat fanaticism through mathematics rather than matching sacrifice with sacrifice. The proximity fuse accomplished more than destroying aircraft and saving ships. It destroyed the fundamental premise underlying kamikaze warfare, that spiritual determination could overcome material disadvantage. Against American radar, miniaturized and mass-produced, the divine wind dissipated into historical footnote. The rising sun set on Japanese military ambitions, brought down by radio waves and vacuum tubes smaller than coffee cups. The final irony was complete and devastating. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor to prevent American interference in their Pacific expansion. They ended the war watching their most dedicated warriors explode harmlessly in empty sky. Destroyed by American technology so advanced, it seemed supernatural to those who faced it. The proximity fuse transformed their ultimate sacrifice into ultimate futility. The radar proximity fuse was democracy's perfect weapon against fanaticism. Not matching sacrifice for sacrifice, but making sacrifice irrelevant through superior technology and production capability. It achieved victory through innovation rather than desperation, protecting life rather than glorifying death. In that victory lay not just the Pacific War's end, but the template for American military supremacy continuing today. The kamikazes came to die gloriously for their emperor and nation. The proximity fuse ensured they died achieving nothing but their own destruction. In that harsh mathematical reality lay Imperial Japan's complete defeat and American democracy's total triumph, measured not in courage displayed, but in electronics deployed, not in spiritual strength, but in scientific superiority, not in willingness to die, but in technology that prevented death through precision, mass production, and the marriage of radar with high explosives.